Hi guys, and welcome to Project Lincoln Diesel Part 4. If you don't know what that is, then check out these videos here and you'll see the ones that we did before. In this video, we're going to take a look at prepping the gearbox and getting that ready to bolt onto the back of the engine, and then taking the whole engine and gearbox package and looking at slipping it into the Lincoln and getting some mounts done. But before we do, hit the subscribe button and the like button and all that cool stuff, and let's get going. Okay, onto the gearbox now then, and we're just going to start cleaning it up and making it look right, and then also give it a little bit of a service as well. So we're not going to go too mad with this because we know that it's a good gearbox and it ran great and drove great, and it's just a case of cleaning it up with a wire brush on the exterior and just making it look nice, and then we'll give it a lick of paint as well afterwards. So I'm taking the sump off here. So this is a plastic sump on the bottom of the gearbox. It's on its side and it's held on by a bunch of Torx bolts. So we're just whipping that off, and then inside, built into this sump, is the filter. So it's a service part. You swap the whole sump during the service. There's a common issue with these gearboxes. Some of the seals on the inside of the mechatronics unit can swell, I think, with time, and they just change shape a little bit and need replacing. So it's a cheap and easy thing to do, so we're going to just jump in and do that. So this is one of the main seals, and then there's 3 or 4 tubular seals here that you can see I'm just pulling out, and they're just sort of stuffed in there really. You can see there, the shape of them, they're slightly off shape. They're supposed to be just a simple tubular shape, and there are a few different length ones as well. So this is the new sump. Like I say, it's a service part, and it comes as a brand new sump with all the new bolts and stuff for you to put it back together again. And then I also got the seals as well, so the replacement seals. So they're the new seals, the tubular kind. And if you take a look here at the old one, you can sort of see this step and in the seal itself, in the rubber seal, where it's sort of misformed and changed shape over time. Whereas the new ones are obviously nice and round and perfectly shaped. So it's just a case of dropping these back in the holes and then basically tapping them all the way home. And I'm doing it here with a hide hammer just so I don't damage anything. Make sure they're all the way home like that, and then just drop this front seal in. And then I'm putting the mechatronics unit back on with what seem to be 1,000,000 bolts, just to unbolt this bit, making sure I'm keeping everything clean and flat, and then just nipping up the bolts. Clean down the gasket face as well, and then it's just a case of dropping this new sump on, and it's got a proper rubber seal, so you don't need to use any sealant or anything. It just bolts straight on there. So now I'm just painting the exterior of the gearbox black. So this is the same black as we did the engine block, which is using Buswell chassis in 1. It leaves like a really nice finish. It's a sort of a satin, matte satin finish, and it'll just protect the gearbox a little bit from alley corrosion, and it just makes it all look a bit nicer than sort of white rusty aluminium. So onto the engine. So before we drop the engine in any further, I thought it would be a good idea to bolt these plates onto the side of the block just to make life easy. So we laser cut these up, and they match the bolt holes on the block on either side. So this is on the right hand side, just underneath the turbo, and that's going to give me something good to mount the engine to. So carry on now, dropping the engine into the hole, and then we can sort of figure out a good position for her and look at getting it bolted in. So it was a bit awkward doing this on my own. I just wanted to be really careful with it. I wanted to make sure I wasn't damaging anything as it was going in, or damaging the body or anything like that as I was dropping it in. So you can see here with the engine in the hole now, down as far as I can get it, or the engine and gearbox, and it's in the tunnel pretty well, as far back as it's going to go. The original transmission tunnel isn't huge, and the gearbox is, so that's about as far as it really wants to go. The main issue we've got is that the sump is hitting the cross member. We're going to pull the engine out, whip the sump off, and that means that we can carry on getting it into position, get the engine into position, and then it will just be a case of sorting out the sump once we know exactly where the engine's going to live. So just taking off the sump And then here you've got the oil pickup pipe as well, which is like a plastic pipe that drops into the bowl of the sump that picks up the oil. So I'm just taking that off as well, just so it doesn't get damaged whilst we do this. And then it was just, we wrapped up the bottom of the engine so it didn't get any muck or anything in there while we worked on it. So there we go, it's going in, just dropping it down, being really careful doing it on my own. Like I said, I didn't want to damage anything and I didn't want to have any disasters as it went down. Okay, so got the engine in the hole, as you can see. She's just chopped up at the minute on wooden blocks and the jack on the rear, on the gearbox itself. So position-wise, I'm really pleased with it. It's in a good spot. As you can see, let's take a look around here. So it's sat nice and centrally in the engine bay. Got good space either side. The engine sat a bit further forward than I would probably like. It would be nice to get it back another 3 or 4 inches, which would just give us extra room up here in the front where the rad pack and everything's going to be. And you don't really need this much space at the back, but it is a big bay. So looking in the tunnel, you can see down there, it's in as far as it's going to go. I can't lift it up anymore, otherwise we'll be hitting the transmission tunnel of the car. So we want to avoid that. There's lots of space around the back here. Changing the starter motor in the future will be a doddle. As I say, it would have been nice to have a bit more space up front here, because originally I was thinking to keep the original Lincoln rad and then just put in a custom intercooler. But what I'm thinking now is this isn't the rad, this is the aircon rad. So, and it's massive and it's unnecessarily big, to be quite honest. So I might end up taking that out, freeing up a ton of space, and then putting in the complete rad pack from the BMW, which comes with all the intercooler, all the aircon stuff, oil coolers for the transmission and stuff like that. So that'll probably be a good idea. Again, tons of space here, so that's good from up above. From below, so from below you can see now we've got loads of room around the sump. Obviously there is no sump fitted at the minute, but we've got plenty of space to stick one. It'd kind of be a mix of a front sump and a rear sump, so it's going to be like a mid sump, because if it was a rear sump you're going to foul on that cross member, and if it's a front sump, which would have been nice, but if it's a front sump it's going to foul there on the anti-roll bar, which is this here. So we kind of want something that's going to go in the middle there, that's a mid sump, but you can see there's tons of space there, so putting something in is not going to be a big deal really. It's just going to be a case of fouling something up, and that way we're not interfering with any of the original Lincoln chassis. So the other consideration then is this steering rod here. Arcade steering design, which annoyingly goes at the rear and not the front, and passes under the gearbox. Let's just show you. So that was one big clearance issue we've got there, is to make sure that we've got space there, but that's worked out really well, and as this moves we maintain that distance there, and might even clearance some of the ribs on the gearbox, but you can see we've got good space there, so that's landed really well. So I'm quite pleased with that. The sump of the gearbox, as you can see, is pretty level, so she's in a good place, and at the minute we just propped up on the jack, so position wise, it's looking really good at this point. So next job now is to basically start mounting it. Obviously we put those steel plates on the engine block, and it means now we've got something to weld to. The original gearbox mount holes probably won't work, but I'll try and tie into them and then just basically join up where the block is to the chassis. But that's the next job. So there's the original bolt hole for the engine mount on this side, and then there is our plate on this side, so we can pick up off of that pretty easily actually. It's not too bad, better than I thought. On the passenger side, the mount's going to be a bit more work. We've got the exhaust to come out here, and then we've got this oil feed pipe here as well, oil drain pipe, sorry, from the turbo. The original mount hole there on the chassis, and our plate is way down here, more towards the front. So there are bolt holes at the rear of the block here, so it might mean that we pick up a bit more here, or try and come this way under the turbo to mount, which is probably the better way, under here, because obviously the exhaust is going to come over the top and take up a lot of room there. Next job then is engine mounts, and here you can see the plates that we bolted on a minute ago, and where they land in relation to the original mounts, which are up here on the cross member. I've got these laser cut plates here, which on this side I'm going to bolt up to the chassis off of the original hole there, like that, and then that's just going to stick out enough for me to be able to put on a rubber engine mount donut and then get it to mount up to the plate on the engine itself. So as you can see, I've done that, and then I'm using the wooden block to mimic the rubber engine mount, so it's the same height as the engine mount that we're using. I just didn't want to use the engine mount that's made of rubber whilst I'm cutting and grinding and welding and stuff around it. So now I just want to change the mount here just slightly and add in an extra bolt hole. So I'm going to put this plate on and drill a hole through the cross member so that I've got this little bit of support here, and then you can see there that the engine mount has got the bolt through it. Onto the other side, I've done a similar sort of thing. As you know, we've got the plate already on the engine side, but this one lands in a really good place. So here's the hole, and I'm just going to drop one of the rubber mounts into that hole and then use this plate to go from the engine and get that to line up with the rubber mount like that. So again, using a wooden block as a dummy engine mount, and you can see there it's really simple way of getting the engine mounted. So we can just weld that up, add in some gussets here across to the main plate, and then that'll be good and strong. Onto the gearbox mount now, and this is a pretty simple one actually. It landed in a really good place where there was an existing cross member. So this is the original gearbox mount that bolts to the gearbox. It's got this odd shape rubber mounting in the BMW, which we're going to replace for just a normal round rubber donut type, just to keep things simple. So I was just cutting down the mount itself and the excess aluminium that's on it so that we can bolt in this rubber mount, which then will land on the cross member on the Lincoln. Here on the Lincoln, I'm just drilling out a fixing point, and what I'm doing is actually I'm drilling 2 holes and then I'm going to cut across and create a slot. That means that when I bolt up the engine mount, I've got a little bit of room to work with. I've got a bit of play, and I can position the gearbox exactly where I want it. I've got a bit of room to work with rather than just trying to line up one bolt hole. I can move the engine or the gearbox ever so slightly to where I want it. And you can see there now, mounted in the tunnel with a mock wooden rubber donut, and that the gearbox is in a good position and it's mounted nice and strong, and there's loads of room around it. Onto the sump now, and that's the last bit of sort of mounting related stuff. Obviously we had to take the sump off to get the engine in, so now we're going to look at modifying it so we can put that back on and the engine's safe again. So the rear mounted sump, or the rear bowl sump, didn't work at all, and we couldn't really do anything with that, so we sourced this front bowl sump, which is off a specific E38, I think, BMW, that's slightly different. It has the bowl of the sump right at the front, and this worked great, and it was almost perfect, but not quite. So you can see there we've marked out a bit with the white pen, and this bit is what fouls on the chassis in the Lincoln or other components in the Lincoln. So we're going to cut that out like so, and then just box that back in so that it clears. And you can see there with the sump mocked up in place, it clears that tie rod mount on the Lincoln. So with a bit of CAD, we've knocked up some plates. They're going to fit there like that. And then it's just a case of welding them to the sump like so, as if by magic. And then we can bolt this sump back up and it'll clear everything, and happy days. So there you go, guys. We've got the engine and gearbox mounted in the Lincoln, which is pretty cool. So now we can drop on with a load of the little other bits and bobs, which we'll take care of in the next video. Before you go, hit the subscribe button and the like button and drop us a comment and let us know what you think.